Hello everyone, and welcome to this next discussion in the RICS Tech Partner Programme series. My name is Andrew Knight. I've been now with RICS for over 11 years, and I work within the area of the business that looks at thought leadership, standards, regulation, and my role is to look at the impact of data and technology right across the built-in natural environment. With over 130,000 members worldwide, working right across the property life cycle, working right across all the different asset types of residential, commercial, rural, land infrastructure. It's obviously an incredibly broad canvas upon which data and technology, not only recently, but for many years, has been having a positive impact on how we can actually provide a better service to consumers and businesses. So today, I'm really pleased to have David Sanderman join me from Essential Information Group. So David, please join me on the call.
Good morning, Andrew. And
morning, how are you?
Exceptionally well. Exceptionally well.
Good to see you again. Well, as ever, before we get into the bits and bytes, it's always nice to have a bit of kind of human backstory here. So it'd be great if you could give me a kind of a brief introduction to yourself, your team, sort of background and experience, and EIG before we go into the kind of more detailed aspect.
Okay. Well, and I don't look this old, but back in '82, I qualified as a barrister. Never intended to practice, but I thought it'd be a great sort of grounding in business. It's either that or an accountant, really. And as soon as I qualified, I got offered a job as a labourer on a building site. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought property development, this looks quite good. And I was working with 2 Italians, and within 3 weeks, they'd offered myself and a very old school friend of mine, I actually spoke to today, a minority partnership in the business, and we did a couple of deals together. And then we went out on our own with another friend of mine. This is 40 years ago this year, and we were buying and selling properties in London during the 80s. And towards the end of the 80s, we had a very severe crash, which basically exited everybody from the property industry. Looking around for something to do because property development wasn't going to be that, I got sent a set of details by an estate agent in Clapham for property at 10 Roselle Road, very near where I lived. I said to my colleagues, I'm sure this has been to auction for. I spent 3 hours going through a whole pile of old catalogues, similar to the cupboard I've got behind me, looking for the catalogue, and eventually found the lot. Phoned the auctioneer up, said, what happened to it, please? And the lovely lady on the desk said, sorry, we don't give out results. Oh, please, I must know this result. She said, okay. And so she called me back a few hours later and said, I found it and it didn't sell, and that's the result. I said, oh, what was it available at? What was the result? Oh, we don't give out that information. And I thought, am I the only person who really wants to know what's happening in the auction world and keep a record of it? So I came up with the idea of the 3 of us going to various London auctions, literally with a notepad and a clipboard and a pen, writing down the results, forming a result sheet, and then sending it out. And faxes were just coming in to fashion then. For those on the call who are young, it's where you could put a document in a machine, it would make a noise, scan it, and it would magically appear the other side of the world as it was recorded. I'll put a price point on that. I bought in 1989 a second-hand fax machine for £2,000. That's 33 years ago. It cost £2,000 to buy one of these. And what I wanted to be able to do was to send a fax out of the results every night. There was no fax broadcast software anywhere, but luckily a friend of mine was a genius on computers, and I managed to persuade him to write the software whereby from a 386 computer, which had 20 meg of hard drive and 640K of RAM, and cost £5,000. He wrote it so that simultaneously we could, via modems planted into the back of the machine, send faxes, dial up 4 fax line numbers to get at a time, and send out a fax and get a report. And the business was born after that. So that was really how we came about, and we've grown from being a little company which would fax out every night what happened at the London auctions to one which is covering the entire country, virtually every auction in the UK, and providing a lot of services across the full spectrum of it. So really, and I've been doing that for 32 years and enjoyed every day of it.
Great. So I mean, if we fast forward to now, how would you kind of describe for people who are listening and viewing this what the overall landscape of the UK auction market is? Because I guess for a lot of people, it's a slightly mysterious, unusual way of transacting property in their view.
Yes, you sort of hear people saying, "Oh, you've got to be very careful. You don't twitch your itch when you go there, otherwise you're going to end up buying a lot." No, that's all buried in folklore now. Currently, we've got about 35,000 lots a year being offered, and in fact, if I share my screen, I can give some
Yeah.
sight of the market. Here we go. Can you see my newsletter?
Yep.
Yeah.
National
So
Auction Analysis.
I publish this every month, and if anybody wants to receive it, just come to the site and you can click on to get it every month. And so if we look in April, we've got the 57 auctions held, just under 2,000 lots offered, almost 300 million pounds raised. And then what we do, we compare them with the previous years. So if I want to look at lots offered, here we can see it's up 2.7% in April, and the amount raised was up 14% from 261 April last year to this. And we look at the year as well. So year on year, so comparing the year just ended at the end of April to the one which ended April 21, these are the increases.
Mm.
And what we've been seeing, and you can see how we got 36 arrow metrics, how the vast majority of these are green, which shows the markets in a sort of positive growth. And this has been going on really since I would say about October 2020. We've seen once everybody got in the gist of not being in the room and online and viewings were sorted out, we've seen a big growth, double-digit growth in a lot of the metrics we measure year on year every month. So that's sort of good news for the industry.
And how do people view it in comparison to what they would see, I suppose, as the standard way of selling, or private treaty as it's called? What's the kind of pros and cons that people have when they compare auction with private treaty?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Andrew. About 1.6% of all property transactions in the UK are done at auction. So the vast majority are done in the private treaty sector. We've got about 300 auctioneers across the country, 250 auctioneers taking part and offering lots. Some are offering 2 or 3 lots. Others, we've got 100, 200 lot sale happening today. So the difference really between an auction and a private treaty sale is what happens when your offer is accepted. In private treaty, you make an offer for a house, you offer say 350,000, and then at that stage, solicitors are engaged, people start looking at the legal documents, and at some stage down the line, maybe 8, 10, 15 weeks, you might exchange contracts, but about sadly 30% of those deals fall out of bed for whatever reason. And it's a long protracted procedure. In addition, the vast majority of those transactions is somebody buying a house for themselves to live in, and the seller on the other side is selling the house they're living in to move elsewhere. In auction, it's completely different. Firstly, the process is, unless it's a conditional sale, which I can touch on later, on the fall of the gavel, there is an exchange of contracts with normally contracted completion 28 days later, which means that when you come to bid, you're not bidding just to have an option to maybe exchange contracts in 8 weeks. You have actually exchanged contracts on the fall of the gavel, which means you've got to do all your due diligence prior and arrange all your finance prior. You've got to look at the legal pack. You've got to ascertain the value, and you've got to be able to fund the exchange and fund the purchase. And what we're seeing is that the majority of vendors at auction are people who don't live or have never lived at the property. So it might be investors, dealers, banks, local authorities, property companies, selling properties they own. So very few property owners who sell at an exchange on the day auction live in the property, and most of the buyers don't have an intention to live there either. It's for investment or redevelopment purposes. Two very different things. And what we know is, because we've got a database of over approaching 1 million lots which have been to auction since 1990, we're seeing currently about 30% of the properties coming to auction have been to auction before. And because we've got a portal effectively of everything that's coming up for auction on one side and everything that's been to auction on the other side, on the portal, when you identify a property coming to auction, you can click a button and it'll show you what's happened in the street. And as I say, 30% of properties are coming up have been to auction before, and not a lot of people realise. And I'll just add that a couple of more things on that. A lot of people think the guide price is what the auctioneer expects to sell the property for. No, it's only an indication where the reserve is currently set, and market forces will determine where it's going to sell for. But again, it's a good idea to look on our site because you can see what similar properties are selling for. And as I said earlier, before you bid, you've got to have satisfied yourself with all the legal position of it. Virtually every lot will come with a downloadable legal pack on the internet. two things I'd say to anybody who's thinking of buying is, firstly, be very wary of the special conditions of sale. These are contract clauses which you are bound by, because you're going to tick a button to say you're happy to be bound by them, which the vendor can write or does write and append to the main contract of sale. And some of them are very onerous in respect of extra fees. I saw last week or last month a property sold, plot of land sold for £100, and there were £26,000 of extra fees payable in the specials. That is a hugely extreme case, but please check it. And the most important document in the legal pack could be the one which isn't there. So if you're looking at a leasehold property and there's no management accounts, ask the auctioneer for them. And if they're not forthcoming, consider, do they have bad news in them?
You've already touched on quite a few sort of aspects of sort of information and data there, but what kind of information can you summarize what auctioneers, buyers, sellers need to safely work in this kind of auction environment?
I think what they really need is a handle on the market. So too many people are relying on the guide price as to what it's going to sell for, and they're spending money getting lawyers to look at legal documents, etc., traveling to the room, getting surveys done, when it sells for a lot more. So you've got to be realistic and understand that the guide price is only where the reserve is, and it could go for a lot more. Auctioneers, yes, they get offered huge number of lots to sell, but they want to have a low reserve so it looks attractive as a guide price in the listings. And so the vast majority of lots they get offered and inspected, they don't list because the vendor wants too much money. You know, so if you're selling a property for, say, you got it on the market for 200,000 with an estate agent, it's not selling, the auctioneer is going to say, well, actually, you know, we want 20-25% daylight between the guide price and reserve and what the open market is. So they want to be guiding it around sort of 150, 160. So everybody goes, cool, that's cheap, I want to buy that. And that gets the herd instinct in, and then the bidding goes. And sometimes people get carried away, think, well, he's just bid it, must be worth that because he bid it, and the other person's saying the same thing.
So in terms of your platform, what kind of information are you hosting and providing, and what's the kind of volume of the information that's passing back and forth?
Okay, well, on our platform, we list about 35, 36, I can tell you, actually, I've got the numbers right here. Yeah, in the last year, yes, so about 25,000 new properties came to the market. And let me just get back to the seminar. And so we list all those properties, and it's fully searchable as a portal would be by address and property type, etc. And crucially, the ability to see the backstory on that property or the street or the locality. And it's used by auctioneers as well. So if you phone an auctioneer up and say, can I'm thinking of selling this property, the first thing most of them will do is pop the postcode into our database and say, oh, I see you didn't sell it at the auction last month. How do you know that? Well, actually, I go to the and it's amazing how many auctioneers catch people out. Oh, I've had this in the family, 15 years. No, you haven't. You bought it last month. So it's that kind of thing. And that's on that side. On the other side, we provide a lot of services for auctioneers. So we've got a great web to print solution, for auctioneers, so auctioneers can go into the platform, type in the raw details of the property and upload the photos, and that automatically generates their web pages, powers their website in their brand, and creates a paginated catalogue if they want, which they like. We host a lot of legal documents, which is a sort of virtual data room in the cloud for a lot of the auctioneers. About 65% of all lots use our platform via a central login system called Auction Passport, and that allows people to see what's coming up for sale, register to view, inspect the legal documents, and if the subsequent documents come into the platform or some exchange, they're notified by email. So there's a full circle around there, and that's proved very popular. I think we've had since we started that 17 years ago, over 250,000 properties, lots, have had the benefit of our document room. We've had over 1.2 million people register and 30 million documents downloaded. So one document leaves our server every 5 seconds.
God, yeah. So I mean,
we've saved a lot of trees.
Indeed. So I mean, how have you been able to use data and technology to help this information to flow more freely? Because clearly you've been in this business a long time, and you must have seen huge changes in terms of how data and tech can support this ability.
We started with a £5,000 20 meg computer and 4 data cards. And very quickly we started building on that. We got into providing auction information to auctioneers via premium rate numbers. Back in the early 90s, you'd dial a number, you get a fax back with the results, or you could listen to the auction live. And in 94, 95, we put together a very rudimentary database of all the records we had, so that people could search. Now that was a database we'd send out on 10 3.5-inch discs to a client. They would have to install it into their machine, and I went around doing a lot of installations. And then every week we'd send out an update disc, which would have that week's data and properties in it, which was, I thought, fantastic. But we wanted to actually update them in real time. And so I had this vision of having some of these modem cards where people would dial in and get the data. And before that, this is one bit of technology which didn't work. We rented space on teletext, which was a CPAX type of thing, which you'd go to it and it had listings in that sort of very basic type font. And I think we only did this for a couple of months because it didn't work. Our clients would have to connect their computer to a TV aerial, which meant having a TV card. And I think it was just about 11 every morning, we would have about 2 minutes to broadcast over that channel a load of gobbledygook, which was sense, which our clients would receive, and then it'd be descrambled on their computer within our software, and they'd get the latest records. But it was a disaster. Well, nobody wanted to have a TV aerial on their desk. I remember demoing it to Reed in their head office in Sutton, and when I arranged a meeting, I said to the PA organising it, "Where's the office?" She said, "On the 14th floor." I said, "Whereabouts in the building?" "North, south." She said, "I don't know." "Can you see Crystal Palace?" She said, "Yes." I said, I had the arrow pointing straight to Crystal Palace, and the signal came in. But listen, it tried. But no, we went live on the web, I think, about 1996, one of the very early adopters, and a very basic website. But I was blessed that a great guy called David Leary just joined me as a sort of young guy in the office to do admin, and it's where virtually everybody in our company starts there, of all the devs come in. And David immediately grasped technology, he's led it, and he's now co-director with me, heading up the IT, and fantastic at doing that.
So it almost sounds, David, that you've almost leapt on every technology that's been out there as it's arrived, but ironically it's always been kind of market led, in terms of you've been identifying, well, this is what the market wants and needs, and let's use whatever technology emerges to do that.
Yes, I've always wanted to be able to get the information out in a format which is easy to use and easy to read. I mean, I'm a complete technophobe, so if I can understand the products that we're putting out, then I think anybody can, because I've got a great help desk and I'm always saying how do I do this. But no, that's the way it's led, and we don't use technology for technology's sake. We want to use it to improve the service we provide.
Now you talk about a lot. I think you mentioned so many millions of documents that have been downloaded, and how that's still a very kind of document-led part of the process. What are you seeing in terms of the journey, as I like to call it, but from kind of documents to having slightly more structured data? Because the danger is that people are still looking at long documents, and arguably there's a productivity gain to be had by having a bit more structure about the information that's in them, and having more kind of structured data, as well as the original lease agreements or management accounts, whatever it may be. What are you seeing in that space?
Well, it's all really a question of the vendors, I think, getting the necessary documents in place early on in the process, so that how vendors put properties to auction, and the legal pack doesn't turn up until the night before the auction. Now, that may be deliberate, or it may be just careless or slovenly on their part. But if you're going to sell something at auction, the first thing is getting the pack. As regards tech, there we are looking at maybe reading some of these documents, which might automatically get them read computer, looking for keywords which might trigger an alarm or some good news or bad news. We just tried it with a title document, actually, just ran a test last week, and it flagged up this property as a cesspit. Now, some people don't want to buy a house with a cesspit, so that's you've been warned from the get-go, it's got a cesspit. So you might say, I'm going to leave it, or I'll run with it. But sadly, I suppose, the auction pack, because it has so many diverse pieces of information, the TA6, agreements, guarantees, planning permissions, there's no central store of that yet, and hopefully that, you know, there's a big move in the industry that properties will have a sort of passport store in which you put these documents in, so that when you do come to sell it, there is a collected area. It seems strange that, you know, the vast majority of the industry don't think about the legal packs until they've instructed somebody to sell the property. So you can't sell a property if you haven't got the fence certificate, and you can't find it, it's not in the loft, and you phone up the company, you find it's gone bust, then you've got a nightmare of a job trying to get a replacement certificate, because the sale cannot happen, certainly in private treaty, without that there. The solicitors will strongly advise a buyer not to go ahead. So
indeed.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a hugely emerging area with the whole debate around upfront information, and we can only hope that technology will help us. I mean, moving on to another part of the auction process, the auction itself. How have you used technology to support the actual auction environment?
Well, this is amazing. Back in 2003, 2004, I was using eBay to buy bits and bobs, you know, from my motorbikes and things, and I thought, I'm seeing all these rooms full of people costing a fortune, and the internet was there really at that stage, and eBay was there. I wanted to build a platform, an auction platform, different to eBay, in that with eBay, they have a set end time to 1,000th of a second, and the last person to bid is the winner. And I felt, well, that's not getting best value for the vendor, and it's not getting best value for the bidder. So we sort of started toying with the idea that we'd write a platform whereby, and this is a crucial difference to every other auction, to mimic what happens in the room, where the auction is the first, second, third, and final. Last bid, thank you very much, don't leave it so late, sir. Whereby we would have a specified end time, but if a bid comes in say the last 20 seconds or 60 seconds, we would then extend it for another 60 seconds. And if a bid came in that period, we'd carry on extending it until we had 60 or 20 seconds or what it's specified of total bidding silence. At that stage, everybody's had 60 or 20 seconds or whatever period specified to place a bid and then get the best possible price. And I mooted this idea with a few auctioneers. No, David, we're going to stay in the room. We love the room. It is a great social atmosphere, and they work their magic getting extra people to bid extra money. And there was no appetite for it. Fast forward to 2012, we got involved working with a great company. It was called Allsop Space in Ireland. It was a coalition a partnership between Allsop in London and Space Property Company in Ireland, who were holding room auctions. But the founder, Steve, wanted to go online. He felt online was the future. He was looking at what's happening in auction.com in America, and that's been very popular. And he said, I'd like to use your platform. And he was the first major person to come up, and he always said to me, and he was very good about this, he said, David, I want to use your platform, but I'm going to build my own. I said, fine. So he had the benefit of seeing our back end and how it all worked, and it gives him, but he went ahead and built it, and it was a great platform. And he used us for about 2 years using our platform, selling properties in Ireland. Went really well. The public liked it. There was no difference in price being achieved. You know, they ran an auction online and then an auction in the room the next day, and there's no difference in price achieved between similar properties, which was great. Public loved it. And then he, in 2015-16, launched his own platform, and he's been promoting via BidX1 ever since. And it's it's a good auctioneer over here. I was struggling to get anybody to sort of say, no, we're going to go online. Well, they could see the benefits, but the energy required to completely turn the ship, which you've been sailing very successfully in that direction, to go that way down the online route was not being taken on board really. There was fringe people doing it. I Am Sold, Pattinson's were doing it with the conditional sales, but nobody else was. Allsop ran 3 auctions using it, great success, but it didn't happen. And then come December 2019, I started reading and seeing on the telly that Woham was closing down to this thing called COVID. I thought, spoke to David, we chat often on a regular basis. And I said, I'm sure it won't happen, but if what's happening in Woham comes to here, we won't be able to have auctions in the room. It's going to be online. Yeah. So we started scaling up. We started thinking, well, what would happen? What would we need if every auctioneer said, have you got a platform? And we just did some sort of pencil sketches and sort of preliminary planning. Well, come end of January, it was getting pretty certain. And in fact, a couple of auctioneers phoned up and said, we need to consider that. And when lockdown came about, we had actually built sites for most of the auctioneers. So when they called up, we say, yeah, we've got a site ready for you. And here it is. And well, room sales went from 100%, 95% of the industry down to 0%. And the internet took off, and it took a few auctioneers some time to get going, but they've settled into it. We've now had 2 full years. We've seen growth in the industry. Everybody's happy with the prices. What has been interesting is the increase in the number of people registering to bid at an auction, because under AML regulation you have to pre-register, so the auctioneer knows how. That's increased partly because of the ease of it. It's all now online, as opposed to having to turn up at the room, which is what you normally did, or get certified accounts sent to you, etc., etc. And crucially, the geographical spread. So let's say you've got an auction based in, and we did some tests here, because we could see who had registered. We managed to read the registration. Pre-lockdown, we would see a room auction. We could plot on a Google map with a pinhead where the registered bidders were, and if it was a regional auction in a town, say Manchester, they'd be based around Manchester. But when we went online, the physicality of the venue was not there, because the auction was on your phone or your screen, and you're that far from it. Everybody was within 3 feet of the venue, effectively, that this has just ballooned out to be national auction. So we've seen people who have run local auctions or regional auctions can now call themselves national auctions, because they've got people coming from all over the country, and bidders from all over the country, and vendors. And of course, the internet, the COVID meant that we couldn't do viewings. So auctioneers were sending staff around, and agents and companies, to go and do a virtual viewing, film the property, etc. Now a camera, a film can't smell the dry rot, but it gives you an indication as to layout, and you can price that in. And so it's transformed the viewing systems. So in that respect, terrible what happened in COVID. From an industry point of view, without it, I would imagine it'd be another 5 years before people are going online. Now everybody is, and very few people are looking to go back to the room. And if they do go back to the room, they will have the full support of a lot of inviting people to bid by the internet if they don't want to turn up. And so we're seeing a hybrid version where some auctioneers might have half the bidders in the room and the other half on the phone or the internet, and it's working well. I think
sorry, carry on, David.
Level. It's like water; it'll find its own level where the balance is.
So I suppose it has become a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But COVID, for better or for worse, has either accelerated things that were already happening, or driven a change in behaviour that, as you say, is not going to return fully to the status quo ante. We won't go back to what it was. I mean, but looking in your crystal ball, I mean, what do you see as the direction of the auction market and its adoption of technology, given we've had this huge step change in the last couple of years? What's the direction of travel, do you think?
Well, we're already finding this now that the core sort of basis of what we do is property auctions, which is really where people are stating what they're prepared to pay for a property, and that's either conducted by an auctioneer or the platform. But we've now got other options whereby we can, using the same sort of technology, where you're registering to people to bid online or to buy online, because you can do the ID checks online. You can get them to agree to your terms and conditions online. That's accepted now. And we have a committed offer whereby people say, well, they can put their credit card in, and the deal here is committed offer. I'm happy to bid £100,000 for this property, and here's my credit card, and if you accept my offer, you can take £5,000 off it, and you've got 24 hours to accept it. So the vendor's got, but somebody else might come along and say, well, I'll give you 98,000 for it, but I'm happy to guarantee exchange and completion, and I've got cash, whether I might want to mortgage, or who'll bid more. Sort of tender situation can come online where you can do that, and that kind of, or just plain and simple buy it now. We have clients who, rather than use the auction process, say, look, this property's for sale for £220,000. If you want to buy it, put your credit card in, agree to our terms and conditions of business, confirm you've read the legal pack, press the buy now button, and you are deemed to have exchanged contracts on that press of the button. So the auction is morphing out into using the ability to put the intentions of two parties into a centrally recorded store called, the computer and the database, to record the transaction, make sure legislation and legal procedures being applied with, and conclude a deal in a number of different ways. So we've got 4 or 5 ways the sale of a property can be achieved. So auction isn't for everybody. Other people like time to go and have a look. They don't want to think that they're up against it. They've got time to run on it. And I think also, with the fact that, we are seeing now a big push from all the bodies that you've got to have your legal pack ready for sale. So people hopefully will, there's no reason why anybody who owns a property shouldn't start thinking about, if I want to sell this tomorrow, what am I going to need to do? Start getting it ready, have it in the shoebox in the loft or on the computer, ready to go, rather than saying, I want to sell the property now, what do I need to do? Oh, where's that guarantee? When do we get the boiler done? Has it been caulking serviced? All those sorts of things. So that will really help, because it's the lack of legal documentation which holds up a lot of sales. Because if it's not there, yes, properties do sell where there's a lack of legal documents, because dealers and investors will take a view. But if it's to become mainstream, there has to be the full set of complete legal documentation. I've bought stuff where things are missing. I say, well, I'm getting it at a discount, so I'm happy with that. But to be mainstream, it does need the full legal pack. And then you can start saying, well, I'll get an unbiased or get an unbinding opinion written by a lawyer who says, in my view, this is what it is. You cannot buy on the basis of this, and this is what you want to ask. But if you do want me to act for you, then I will, and I'll say the same thing. And my advice will be then insured. So it's very important, if you are looking at legal documents which got advice, is it insured, and do you have the benefit of that insurance and professional indemnity?
Indeed, indeed. Well, it's been fascinating, David, particularly I think because you've been in this business so long, you've seen so many generations of technology arrive. And I think what's impressive is how you've used each degree of technology, which today we might look back and see as charmingly primitive, but at the time, that was the best technology, and you used it as much as you could to solve genuine problems. So it's been fascinating to talk, and I look forward to catching up with you again in the future, David.
Thanks, Fred. I really enjoyed chatting through auctions with you.